All right. Welcome, my beautiful, wonderful listener, to the Talking About Talking podcast, where we talk about everything and anything, and we talk about talking about those things. Today, I am joined by Robert French. Rob identifies as a geek, and he is currently an agile coach for one of the top financial institutions in the world, where he helps teams find better ways of working and developers improve their technical craft. He started programming at the age of 9 and was self-taught until college, where he graduated summa cum laude. I had to look up how to pronounce that. And started on his track of serial entrepreneur. He's built and owned and operated multiple businesses, has been an adjunct professor on and off for more than 2 decades in both the private and public sectors, is the former senior programmer analyst for Rogers Cable, has been a CTO, a CEO, a faculty head, and loves coding and just geeking out with other humans or animals. Thank you for joining me today, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man.
That was quite the mouthful of an introduction, dude.
Hey, you wrote it, so
I didn't expect you to take all of it, though. I thought you were going to piecemeal.
That's what you got. All right, that's what we're working with. So, Robert, you were my programming professor in college.
I was.
For video game design.
I was.
I learned so many different things from you. And of all of those things, I probably valued the programming the least. And I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, that's funny the way that happens, eh?
Yeah. And of those things, there's one thing that you taught me that stuck with me for a long time. And I try to get better at it all the time. And has provided so much value in my life. And that is taking ownership of your choices and their outcomes, owning up to your mistakes.
That is excellent.
Can you elaborate on that for me? The importance of that.
Well, I think accountability is where the growth happens, right? We don't grow in our comfort zone. We grow by getting out of our comfort zone and trying things. Many people have completely forgotten that as a small child learning to walk or stand up, I can pretty much guarantee every single listener out there fell on their ass a few times, if not a few thousand times. One of the big things that separates the brilliance of children who are less sophisticated adults is that they didn't care if anybody was looking or if it didn't work. We innately just push ahead. And so I think it's important to own up to what's true and move forward from that. Sometimes there's good learning opportunities. Sometimes they're not the greatest learning opportunities. We knew better. We did it anyway. Still screwed up. Oops. Oh, well. But overall, I think it's important to see where you are and reflect on that.
I love that. Yeah, I remember I had a job working as a floor walker at a mushroom factory. And
nice.
I
good mushrooms or regular mushrooms?
The unfun mushrooms, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I had parked a skid in front of an emergency exit, and the supervisor came over to me and my colleagues and was going 100. Who parked a skid in front of the emergency exit? As soon as she said that, I raised my hand and I went, me. That's me. I did that. That's my bad. I screwed up. And she just immediately went, oh, okay. Well, don't do that again.
Amazing how that works, right?
Pretty amazing, yeah. So when we spoke on the phone, you mentioned 3 stages of communication or something along those lines.
I think on the phone we talked about the 3 different agendas.
Yeah, that was it. Can you
talk about the 3 different agendas?
Yeah, just go on those for me.
Sure. So I mean, it's an observation that if we have a meeting or some kind of conversation with someone that's planned, you typically have at least 3 different agendas. You have the planned agenda, i.e., this call, for example, said, hey, we're going to get together. We're going to talk about talking. Awesome. So now we have an agenda. That's the one primary set agenda. Now within that, you as the host have your own personal agenda. You have some idea about where you want to take the conversation a little bit. I, as the guest, have a little bit of an agenda in terms of, I want to show up as best as I can and I was present and the rest of that. So the second agenda is our personal agenda. And the third type of agenda is the emergent agenda. And that's just what happens when we get together and start riffing on things, whether it was planned or not. Sometimes we go completely off topic and, down a rabbit hole or 12. Maybe somebody tangents on a specific part of a topic. Those are all part of the emergent agenda. And each one should be reflected upon.
Awesome.
If you want to know if you're getting value out of your communications, what was the planned agenda? What was my agenda? We're stepping into a meeting. all have meetings throughout our days. Before you step into the meeting, ask yourself, what's my personal agenda in this? Why am I attending this? What value do I hope to receive from it? What value do I hope to give to this? It'll make you a better communicator.
I love this. This ties exactly into one of my frameworks that we'll get into later. Social media communicates with the user in ways to keep them on the platform and interacting as much as possible. And they kind of sort of like prey on your every weakness to get money out of you as the product from advertisers, right? And then video games communicate with their user in ways to keep them playing and making sure they're having fun. They incentivize you with dopamine to hope that you continue to play. They want to inspire you to buy their next game, to encourage your friends to buy their game, to pay for in-game microtransactions to buy the DLC, or to their credit, some game companies just want you to enjoy the game and have fun, right? How would you say that the strategy around attention between social media and video games are similar, and how would you say they're different?
Oh, that's a good question. I think social media has, to a large degree, followed what works in video games. Video games learns from what works in social media and then applies some of those things, or tries. Sometimes it fails and goes up in a blazing bomb of that didn't work.
Okay, so sorry, before I let you continue, are you saying, which one are you saying is like the grandfather of it? Or are you saying?
I think that neither of them are the grandfather.
Okay.
I think they're both grandchildren of something marketers have known for a long time. And that is, we have to find different ways to get people's attention, and we have to find ways to help keep their attention, either consciously or subconsciously. Video games have absolutely perfected the cadence of dopamine release, of little tiny serotonin and dopamine hits based on feedback loops and rewards. I mean, you probably remember my whole spiel about,
widget cranking jobs.
Yeah, if we look back 100 years into the industrial age, we all had widget cranking jobs. It wasn't difficult to figure out what you did. You got up in the morning, you went to work, you had a box on cranked widgets, you had a widget cranking device, and you basically ka-chunk, I did something. So you had the energy at the end of the day to leave the factory job, go back home and build a fence around your 40-acre yard, plant more vegetables, do all of the other manual labor chores. People didn't necessarily complain, air quotes, that they were tired all the time. Then you fast forward to today, and you have projects that are 24, 48 months in duration, lots of ambiguity, lots of complexity. You don't necessarily get those same sense of accomplishment until the very end of that project, where you do a post-mortem and try to figure out, hey, what went well here? What didn't go so well here? There's different strategies to do that more frequently and improve as you go. But in the general scheme of things, you don't really get that sense of accomplishment. And I firmly believe that as human beings, we are hardwired for that sense of accomplishment. I think that's why most executives golf, is so they can go click, whop, I did something. Just because video games has monopolized this, because you could drive anywhere in any city or down the road and see somebody walking across the street staring at their phone, not paying any attention, completely oblivious to the world around them, because they have just, killed a pig, cleared a line.
Got a Pokemon.
Got a Pokemon, got some jewels to line up.
Yeah.
All of those things create a sense of accomplishment.
Bejeweled and
Candy Crush.
Yeah. Yep. So are you saying that sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Are you saying that the widget cranking jobs are fewer and further between?
Oh, they absolutely are. The widget cranking jobs come from a mindset usually referred to as Taylorism, where we can take an uneducated body, an uneducated group of individuals, and teach them how to do a very specific job. And then that's their job, is to do that one specific task over and over and over again. And I mean, Henry Ford is credited with putting together the moving assembly line, which allowed people to just stay stationary and do their job, and the things moved in front of them as they went. That works with non-complex work. That does not work with anything that has a lot of dynamics to it or a lot of unknown unknowns. You can't take an uneducated workforce and train them to a specific thing. In most cases, they've never done the thing before, so they have no idea how it works. You definitely can't crack a whip at them, which is kind of funny, because in my day-to-day job, I like to remind people that the phrase, the beatings will continue until morale improves, does not work. And it doesn't matter how hard you beat them, they're not going to get faster. What you really need to do is trust the people you hire and let them make mistakes.
And I'm sure you've tried as hard as you can. So I would be amiss if we had this conversation and never touched on ChatGPT. I feel like we have to at least mention it.
What a great thing going on in the world right now.
Fascinating.
Yes.
And that is kind of part of where my question is going. Where in our modern world do you see ChatGPT causing the most friction or being the most threat? Where do you see it providing the most benefit? And what should we expect as it is iterated?
Maybe the same things. I think threat. You said threat, and my brain said disruption.
Well, I specifically tried to say friction or threat so that you could kind of pick either of those and go whichever way you want. So disruption, if you want to think disruption, we can go that way.
Sure. I mean, in all of those cases, there's going to be a little bit of friction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a threat or a disruption. Or I think that the folks at OpenAI have done an amazing job, not just in what they've built, not just in putting in some reasonable, and I honestly believe they're reasonable preventative mechanisms so the entire world can't go crazy. There's still ways around some of the safeguards that they've got in place, but
you're talking about the little bits of censorship that they have in it.
Yes, and the way that a lot of people don't know, if you go to ChatGPT and say, write me a marketing plan or something of that nature, it's not going to give you the greatest. It's going to give you a pretty generic answer. But if you said to ChatGPT, as a marketing executive with $1 million budget, and what you've just done in that one sentence to ChatGPT is you've told it to put on a specific hat. And with that hat on, it will give you more in-depth answers. So you can say and you give it the role that you want it to play. And it will actually give you way better answers than just asking the initial question.
Well, so that's a little bit of a strategy on optimizing your ChatGPT use.
Absolutely. Making sure that it's talking from the voice that you actually want it to be thinking from. Okay. Not that it's air quotes thinking. I mean, we're right. A long way from singularity AI, which they've even stated. I think they're already being disruptive. I mean, Google's announcement this morning with their own competitive platform. I forget what it was called. It was in my Flipboard. I didn't read the entire article. I just know Google has announced that they are rolling out their own version of ChatGPT naturally because they're big data, right? So they have all that access.
Well, and I feel correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they're feeling a little threatened with their search engine with ChatGPT because they make so much of their revenue from Google search. And you can just ChatGPT anything that you search and it'll just give you an answer directly. You don't got to sift through articles or weird things with a bunch of different ads on it. I mean, how many times I've looked up a recipe on my phone and I got like a quarter of my phone screen to try and find the text that is the actual temperature of the freaking oven. There's just ads everywhere.
I have a funny anecdote about that. Just this morning, yesterday, I had mentioned to one of my colleagues that I was looking at a code kata, which is a practice that you do. It's a simple algorithm that you rebuild, but you can add constraints to help developers think about the problem in a different way. Based on a little simple trivia program. And within the kata, it's referred to as dirty trivia. And so I had said to him just, matter-of-factly, I'm looking at the dirty trivia kata. And he this morning, as I was sipping on my coffee, had commented, do not Google dirty trivia. So context is everything, right?
Yes, context is everything.
I think ChatGPT is well positioned. It's already started to disrupt things. Educational facilities incorrectly are worried about students using it to plagiarize or to...
Why do you say incorrectly?
If the student is taking the time to go to ChatGPT and ask the question, they are already progressing. If the student then asks the questions that allow the system to generate a generic response for them, they still have to transcribe that into their whatever they're handing in. And there's a high probability they're at a bare minimum reading it. So they're still learning.
They're at least getting something out of it.
Oh, I'm saying that the educational industrial complex has lost sight of the purpose of education, which is to help people learn how to deduce things. And it's how they learn to deduce those things. If these are the tools that people are going to have moving forward, then they should be embracing them, not banning them.
Yeah, I hear people talking about it in similar context to the argument against the calculator.
Right.
They'll know how to do math, yada, yada. You're never going to have a calculator in your pocket everywhere you go.
But here we are with phones in our pockets that have calculators. Now, I mean, on the flip side of that, I think there's a time and a place for it. I don't think that...
Trigonometry?
No, not the calculator. I mean, I think back to when my oldest daughter was in grade 1 and they were learning skip counting, which is just multiplication, but done through kept counting, right? 2, 4, 6, 8.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the teacher wanted to give them calculators. And I had quite a heated argument with the teacher about, I'm perfectly okay with my daughter learning how to use a calculator. I don't think that she should be leveraging the technology to understand the underlying principles. And I think it's important that we teach those underlying principles. But again, I think the educational industrial complex fails us continually, i.e., nobody knows how to budget coming out of high school. There's some pretty basic stuff that we gloss over. We also treat history as though it's fact and not just written by the victor.
That is a very fair point. Oh, from there we could go into so many different corners. All right, let's get into it though here, Rob. Let's start doing some stress testing. So first of all, communication sucks.
What?
The human thought is arguably one of the most complicated things that we can perceive, and we're trying to exchange them with grunts and gestures. Like, I have a uncomplicating system in my brain that uncomplicates my thoughts and turns them into grunts and gestures. And then you have a recomplicating system in your brain that recomplicates my grunts and gestures into a thought in your own brain. And then you repeat the process back the other way. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you've just described communication using your vocal cords.
Yeah, I guess so. So would you agree that it kind of sucks compared to how complicated the human thought is?
I'm interested in this perception that communication sucks. I think communication is awesome.
Okay. Yeah. So I love communication. It's like one of my favorite things to do. That's why I'm doing this.
Right.
When I say sucks, I mean inefficient. I mean, on the scale.
Efficiency.
Yeah. Like on the scale of how complicated the human thought is, talking is just so much freaking effort. And we're just like, right now, we're just struggling and clambering to try and come to some sort of agreement on what the hell this is that we're talking about.
Sure. I think given the tool set that we have, though, like we can write, we can draw. Hieroglyphs were a thing. We now call them emojis. We can communicate with just emojis or just hieroglyphs. We could do it with prose or storytelling and have, layers upon layers of messaging, helping the reader or the person narrating go on a journey. We're storytellers as a species. We enjoy telling stories. Oral tradition and storytelling has been with us for thousands of years. So I think despite its shortcomings, it works well when you have a few things clear, i.e., are we using the same protocol? You're using English, I'm using English, so check mark there. Do we both have the ability to speak and make the sounds as well as hear and receive the sounds? Check on those parts, so we're okay there. Do we have cognitive ability to interpret and take the abstract and apply it into a thought? I think you and I are in good position, although some days I wonder about some folks, but that's a whole different rant that we don't need to take this second. So I hear what you're saying. It's not as efficient. Let me just back up for a second. I think that perspective plays a great role in that. From our current vantage point where we see computers transmitting tons of data, almost what appears to be instantaneously, speaking might seem like a pretty slow, pretty cumbersome way to communicate. Now, if we think about ants and how they lay down a scent, and different scents mean different things, and the other ants have to find the scent and then follow the scent, I would say that's even less efficient a method of communication.
Yeah.
So I think that the perspective has to be noted, right? We're coming at it from a position of technology, and computers do not operate as fast as we perceive them to, nor do they operate anywhere near the speed in which the neurons fire in our brains. Right. So I think our brains are in pretty much the dominant position still, even though we're utilizing vocal cords and ears to create vibration and interpret vibration.
These pathetic fleshy bodies of ours.
Yeah, our meat suits, right?
Yeah. I think overall it just feels like the human mind operates at a capacity, like you're saying, the human mind operates at such an incredible capacity, and then we're so limited by these, like you said, these vocal cords and such. And it can feel like trudging through a swamp sometimes when you're trying to get it out. And I like to acknowledge within this whole idea that there are quite a lot of people that really, really struggle. Like there's so many people I've met in my life where I talk to and they go, yeah, that. And they'll say a little bit, and I'll just be very good at interpreting my recomplicating of the little bit that they're saying. And then I'll spit back out and I'll try to say what they just said back to them. And they'll go, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. And they just almost feel this like relief, like, oh, you made that so much easier. Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Analogies are good for that too, right?
Yeah.
We use them all the time to try to convey a meaning faster.
Yeah. And that's kind of what a lot of these are just analogies. And I love that you pointed that out, because that's pretty much all of these are as analogies, because I'm trying to bring, this one is just a foundation. The whole communication sucks, communication is hard thing. I like to lay that out as a foundation, because a good setting for the rest of the conversation.
Verbal communication is clunky, I think is a statement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is definitely an understatement. And textual conversation is just, it's the bottom of the barrel of human communication, until we have added emojis, which is a little bit better. We got a tiny bit of emotion in there now. Just don't hit the wrong button, I guess. So onto the first visual is the priority pyramid. So life's top priority. Everyone in the world has a pyramid that it represents the priorities in their life. And whether they behave like it or not, whether they acknowledge it or are aware of it or admit it, the top pinnacle of their pyramid is their relationships with the people that matter most in their life. With help with some friends along this journey so far, we have but we have decided so far that the very tip top should be your relationship with yourself. And then kind of just barely secondary to that is the relationships with the people in your life, not the humans, not them like physically existing. The relationships you have with them is the most important thing above all else, no matter who you are.
So communication makes up 1/3 of what builds relationships, right? I'm a firm believer that you need trust, respect, and communication to build any kind of solid relationship, regardless of the dynamic. So communication is just one part of that.
I would argue that communication is all of that, though. That not, because trusting is a certain way of communicating. Respecting is a certain way of communicating.
If I'm communicating the trust, but trust is a feeling. Trust is a sense.
Yeah, but trust isn't trust a feeling or a sense that you're going to be feeling or sensing based on what you're perceiving, and that perception is communication.
I hear exactly what you're saying. I think that trust and respect, we need communication to build trust and respect. But the principle itself of trust or the principle itself of respect is its own thing.
I don't think it's separate from communication, though. I think it's within it. I think communication still encompasses all of it. It kind of has to, because all of your actions, all of your words, all of your body language, everything you do is communicating.
Take Anthony Kiedis. I've never spoken a word to him. I have deep respect for him and trust him completely.
Yes, but he's communicated with you deeply.
Well, he's communicated.
Yes. And with you.
Yes. Well, I've listened.
Exactly. So then the respect and trust that you have for this guy would not exist without the immense communication that he has done, that you have received.
Is it communication if it's just one-sided?
Yes.
I'm just trying to get a qualifying.
Is a smoke signal communication?
If it's seen.
Okay.
If I just start blowing out smoke signals and nobody sees them, is it still communication?
It's an attempt.
Okay. So we're putting them in the same camp. Attempt of communication or communication, same camp. We're broadly speaking.
Yeah, because
I want to make sure. So sure, trust and respect and communication. Trust and respect would require communication, even if it's only single.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay. So are we on the same page about the priority pyramid?
That our relationships are at the top of that?
Yeah.
The relationship with the self, followed by the relationships with others.
Correct. And then next to that, you can argue about like meaning and purpose, and then health and like other stuff. And you can argue the order of those things. But frankly, I don't care. I think that the top
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Relationships, and that's what matters most.
Mother is the name of God on the lips and hearts of all children. So yeah, I could totally.
Awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
We're all raised by someone. We were all produced by someone. Hopefully we're not being grown in laboratories yet.
Not yet. Yeah. Give it a couple of years.
As batteries. Oh wait.
Say ass batteries?
No, as batteries.
Oh, okay. I was going to say ass batteries.
Ass batteries. That's a new one. Usually I refer to people affectionately as ass hats. Ass batteries is a new one.
That is good. Would that be, I think that would be an insult. I think so. It doesn't sound like a compliment.
I mean, we can have a whole discussion about my intention versus how somebody interprets it, but
That's a fair point. Okay, so next we have mind the gap. So there is a gap between all people at all times. That gap can never, ever be filled, but your intention should be to try and fill that gap as much as possible. And you should maintain a steady awareness and attention, the gap between you and others.
Is there though?
Yes.
Is there?
Yes. Like right now, you and I are in a way minding the gap. We're spending some time together. We're getting to know each other a little better. We're sharing thoughts back and forth. I would argue that this is one of the best ways to mind the gap. I would argue that sitting beside each other and both watching a movie together, even if you're the kind of people that don't talk during movies, that's another way to mind the gap, because you're both experiencing something in each other's presence and you both are fully aware that you've each experienced it in the same set and setting.
What about when you think of someone you haven't thought of in a long time and your phone rings and it's them?
Oh, now we're getting into like telepathy kind of stuff.
Oh, what I'm asking is, and I don't mean to derail your
Bro, you can take this wherever you want.
Yeah. I'm just like, I firmly believe that I'm a vibrational essence experiencing a physical manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe we all are. I buy into the idea of a collective consciousness that we cannot perceive in our waking moments. The majority of us, I think there's a few edge cases there. And I think that we are all interconnected. Not only are we all interconnected with each other, we are all interconnected with everything. The energy that makes up the air around us is the same energy that makes up our bodies, energy that makes up the computers we're working on, electrons that are firing across the space and wires and fiber optic cables, allowing us to have this conversation, is all the same energy. It's all conscious energy. And I think that there's a lot more to it than what we understand. And I mean, I hear science talking more and more about, how this might be a simulation. We're not sure. And that just fits perfectly into my paradigm of existence, which is, we've created all of this for the purpose of experience, because in our natural state, we have all of the knowledge, but none of the experiences. So why not put ourselves into an environment where we could be on the bleeding edge of creation, ever expanding, always experiencing new things from different perspectives. And I think if I don't put that out there for this point of the conversation, it's easy to get misaligned, because I just want to make sure that you're not including all of those metaphysical points of possibility within the framework. You're adhering to the scientific belief that we are human beings in meat suits in a specific time and space, having a conversation through our vocal cords and ears, and that's all there is to it. There is no other connection.
Okay. I think I know where you're going with this. So based on my minding the gap proposal, you're insinuating that I'm coming at it from the latter perspective that you just gave.
Correct.
I want to make note that I'm coming at it from the former. And what I mean by that is to touch on the very first part that you said, that we're all a collective intelligence, or we're a collective consciousness, and that all energy is all the same and we're all connected. I firmly believe basically all of what you said. I probably would not have worded it all exactly the way you worded it, because you were you and I am me, but there's really nothing there for me to disagree with. And when I say there's a gap between us, I think that naturally, so I think about it like this, like my fiance, who I've spent the last 5 years with, like I don't know her. I know her really freaking well. I know her better than most other humans know her on the planet. But realistically, I can't know. I'm not her. Exactly. And then even us as ourselves, we struggle to even know ourselves sometimes, right? Many people, yeah.
And sometimes, yes.
Yeah. And so I like to think of it as that kind of disconnect, that lack of understanding of the other individual. Like I like to say kind of, I don't exactly remember the words you use, but I like to say that I am the consciousness that is in the body that is Trevor, that is experiencing the life that Trevor is experiencing. And
same thing I said.
Yeah.
Vibrational essence experiencing physical manifestation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so I recognize all that, and I feel like in a way minding the gap, and I don't know if you've read the book Tribe, I forget the author.
Tribes by Seth Godin.
Probably. Yep. That sounds right. Yep. And how like we just need to respect each other and acknowledge that I am human and you are human, and there's immense value in that, and do what we can to better each other and get to know each other better and how we can work together better. And I think that those efforts in minding the gap, as I talked about earlier, and all of those things are working towards moving the collective consciousness closer together.
Okay. I can see what you're saying. In agility, we would phrase that as the prime directive, which is always assume that everybody is putting their best effort in.
I don't think
Okay?
everyone is.
But the assumption is when you're working with people that they are, just not necessarily from our perspective. Again, perspective is everything. You know, the idea that you need to go buy a pair of running shoes, and so you go to the guy who sells the running shoes, and the guy who's selling the running shoes needs to make a sale and wants to earn some profits. So you both have a need. They're both very different needs. He has a surplus of what it is you want. You have some of what he wants. And so you have to negotiate based on a price to find an equilibrium that allow you to have a happy interaction where you're happy with the shoes you get, he's happy with the price that you paid. Neither one of those is good or bad. They're just different perspectives. Like it's not like he's a bad person because he has shoes and isn't giving them for free.
No.
And you're not a bad person because you need shoes and are willing to utilize monetary resources to get them, right?
Right.
So same, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying when you're minding the gap, correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm crazy. When you're saying minding the gap, you mean building on the conscious awareness of another individual.
Yeah, of another consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Awesome.
That was
Okay.
long and drawn out and probably bored a bunch of the listeners. Super sorry about that.
No, that's what they're here for. Okay. So we're understanding on minding the gap. And you would say that
So
having
does this
that
gap sit between that topmost layer and the next layer down in the pyramid? Is it
no,
like
it's not in the
there's-
pyramid. It's a
Oh,
separate
okay.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a good question. No, these don't. So sometimes these things link together, and I might find a way to piece them all together and change some of them so they fit together better. But a lot of them are used for just explaining different things. And the gap is just understanding that there's always going to be a gap between each person. So it's like the priority pyramid is like this understanding of we need to prioritize our relationships in our life. And then you need to also at the same time acknowledge that there's going to be a gap between your most important people and you all the time. And you can never, ever fill that, but you should try to all the time. Right.
I love all the absolutes, but they make my brain itch. Always, never, because you're telling me about this, and what's coming to mind is the Mayan phrase "in lakich," which literally translated is "I am another yourself" or "I see you."
That's good.
It was a greeting that people would use to say, "I see that you are a different perspective of my consciousness, but we are the same consciousness, and I acknowledge your presence and greatness."
Yeah, that's essentially mind the gap. Yeah, you remember Josh and Clayton.
I remember Clayton.
Yeah.
I remember Clayton well.
Yeah.
Yep. Josh, fuzzy, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
we're going back over a decade.
Yeah, we are. Sorry. Yeah, but we would say mind the gap to each other as we would part ways as kind of a goodbye.
Yeah. I have buddies that we say things like journey well or in like each.
Yeah, that's good. I love that.
Yeah.
So next we have the Lego hologram analogy. And this is, buckle up. This is a framework for understanding. So as you have a conversation, you can kind of imagine that there is hologram floating between you and I as we're conversing, right? And as we speak and add to the conversation, we're adding a block of Lego to that hologram. Holograms are Lego structures. Oh. And the problem is it's two holograms. And I can't see yours and you can't see mine. But as I speak, I add to the one you see. And as you speak, you add to the one I see, right? What we talked about earlier, that uncomplicating, recomplicating system. And I think we mentioned on the phone talking about intention. And when you don't set intention, which very few people do with conversations, and I would never even go so far as to say that you should always set intention. That's ridiculousness. Because quite often people will just spend time together and they'll just start a conversation. And when they just start talking in the middle of a subject about whatever, and they don't set intention, they don't set the groundwork for what they're talking about, someone might assume that based on the context of how they brought it up, they're talking about a spaceship, building a spaceship with their conversation. when really they're building a dragon. And as they're talking, they're like, there's a body. And they're like, yeah, body, cool. And then they're like, there's a head. And they're like, call it a cockpit, but head, okay. And then they're like, yeah. And the other guy's like, yeah, there's fire. And okay, yeah, fire, definitely. It's coming out the back. And he's like, no, it's
Ultron.
not right. Yeah. And then he's like, and then there's wings. Okay, wings. It's made of metal. No, it's not made of metal.
Oh.
Right. And then they're like, whoa, what's going on? He's like, well, I don't want a metal dragon that farts fire. This is stupid. And then
Volt farting fire.
Right. So basically, I find that happens all the time in conversation, that kind of misunderstanding. And my biggest beef with it is that too many people will hit that point in the conversation where they realize they were talking about two different things, and they will maintain the anger and frustration rather than just immediately diffusing the situation. And
so is the problem with the hologram, or is the problem with the attachment to being right?
Yeah, that's definitely the problem. The hologram is more of an analogy to help understand how this happens.
And sure, that's a good analogy. It's funny because when you first started talking about the hologram, I happily entertained it because we're talking about Lego, and I happen to like Lego. But I was thinking, well, this is no different than the fact that I'm in my office and you're in your office, and we're both staring at a screen, which is in fact a hologram. It's just one that we can physically interact with. But the same analogy, like the same physicality, exists to summarize your hologram without the Lego bricks or the UFO or fire spewing dragons.
So
you don't know what my desktop looks like. I don't know what your desktop looks like.
Yeah, well, I know what your desktop looks like because you're looking at me, and I can see a video of me right here.
So you know what one window on my desktop looks like.
Yeah, I got something.
Right. But you can't see all the other things.
And you could literally share your screen right now.
I could, but I couldn't share both screens.
I'm sure there's a program.
Or the screens on the computer behind me, or the actual surface of the desk, right?
Point your camera at it, couldn't you?
No, because it's attached to the screen.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess I could pick up the whole damn monitor.
Yeah.
But yes, I understand what you're saying about a hologram made of Lego bricks in the relation to the communication and how you have to build up certain things and hope that what it is you're conveying is being assembled in the same way. And then for the latter part of that, when you said people hang on to the misunderstanding part of it, that to me is more of a character. I don't want to say flaw, but it's a character attribute.
Agreed. Yeah. It's not part of the system. I'm just using the analogy as a way to explain a fault in human communication. And that's kind of what these are for.
Misalignment.
Yeah. And with that, another thing that I find is sometimes you will have conversations with people, and people say, people who listen for the moment you stop talking so that they can continue talking about what they wanted to talk about.
That's actually directly related to the 3 levels of listening. Okay. That's level 1. Yeah. Level 1 listening is when you are waiting for the pause so you can say what you're thinking, because you have something that you need to say. And so you're not really present to what the other person is saying. You're going through the motions. Level 2 listening is when you're engaged with one individual and only that individual. And so you're not waiting for an opportunity to speak, and things flow a little bit better. We usually describe that as, we had a good conversation because there was flow. And that flow is because both parties are actually interested in what the other person has to say. The 3rd level of listening is when you have additional awareness, what's going on in your environment, and paying attention to that. Are there other people involved? How are they responding to what's being said within the conversation itself? So those are the 3 levels of listening.
I like that.
Level 1 being what you were talking about.
Yeah. And with that, with people that only function at level 1 listening, it's like they're a toddler playing with Lego, where you're trying to build with them and they're like, yeah, no, I don't want that piece there. And then they just keep building, and you're like, okay, how about we add this here? And they're like, yeah, no, I'm going to keep building what I want to build. And they just completely ignore your input.
But then if you get up to walk away, they throw a temper tantrum because they wanted to build with you.
I like that. Yeah. Never thought about it that way. If you just walk away from the conversation, they're like, hey, you're a prick. You didn't listen to me speak for no reason.
At coach camps are when a bunch of crazy agile coaches all get together to share stuff. We typically do something called an open space. So at the beginning of the day, everybody will come up with topics that they want to talk about. We'll have different designated areas. So people pick areas and times that they're going to have their talk. And the hardest part is choosing what talks you want to go and be part of. But we use an analogy, the butterflies and bumblebees, and that is for everybody to feel free to be either a butterfly or a bumblebee. And a butterfly kind of flits about and doesn't necessarily go to any of the talks, but interacts with the people moving between the talks. A bumblebee is a pollinator, and so they'll go into one talk, and as long as they are giving or receiving value in that talk, because these are all interactive discussions that happen, they will remain there. And as soon as they are no longer able to give value or don't feel they're getting value, they are free to just leave and go to another group, sometimes carrying over some of what the other area's discussion was and pollinating the group with that information. And I think we need way more bumblebees and butterflies in the world. It helps smooth over a whole bunch of misunderstandings that people have where, oh, maybe just people find themselves too serious.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so while we're on this topic, you're talking about these butterflies and bumblebees and the pollinating and the fluttering around and the different kind of way that you're saying these agile coaches will be encouraged to behave with their communication at these coach meetings. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, hopefully at all meetings.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm helping people to have the autonomy that if they are in a meeting that they are getting no value from and bringing no value to, they just get the hell up and go do something more productive.
Okay. And while we're on this topic, I think it's important to give you at least an opportunity to elaborate on what the hell is an agile coach.
That's a really good question. I ask myself that every day as the imposter syndrome voice runs through my head. What gives you the right to be an agile coach, despite having so many years of educating and coaching and helping people understand? So an agile coach typically has, a couple of different hats that we wear. We could have the hat of just an observer, where we're just going into an area to see how things are being done and to see if we have any observations that folks are missing, because it's really easy, as I'm sure you know and everybody knows, it's really easy to fall into the trap of not being able to see the forest for the trees. So we could have just an observational kind of purpose where we go in and then go back to leadership and have a conversation with them about what those observations were. Maybe there was dominating voices that were stepping over the other voices that could have been speaking, and there were missed opportunities. Maybe there's dictatorship going on, command and controlism, which is not an agile philosophy. The agile community at large has 4 key values that we hold everything up against to say this is agility or this is not agility. And they've pretty well stood the test of time. And it originally came out of software development practices, but it's now also part of business. The idea is to ensure the best communication and flow within teams to allow them to operate and deliver real value as quickly and easily as possible. And some frameworks exist specifically to remove waste. There's certain techniques that can be used to optimize for flow versus trying to optimize for what industry still calls resources. And by that, they mean people. As a coach, I'm constantly reminding people that a resource is a piece of wood, i.e., if I cut the piece of wood in half, I now have 2 pieces of wood. But a human being is not a resource, they're an individual. And if I cut them in half, I now have to figure out how to get rid of 2 halves of a body. Very different things.
If you ever need help with that, let me know.
Sure. Good to know.
I got a shovel.
Shovel and some lye. So really, there's 4 key values that we try to uphold: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And that's not to say processes and tools aren't important or needed in some way, but it is to say that individuals and the way they interact is of greater importance than the processes or the tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation, meaning I would much rather see a piece of working software, assuming, again, remember that this comes out of software delivery. So you could just change that for product, a working product over comprehensive documentation. Who reads the documentation? I mean, you went to school for dev. You know how little you enjoyed writing documentation of any kind. People who have to read that documentation feel the same way. It doesn't get read, it doesn't get updated. So it's not to say that documentation isn't important, but comprehensive documentation is definitely not worth the effort compared to having working software or a working product.
It's not worth the time and effort to force comprehensive documentation if it's going to compromise product.
There you go. So that's the second key value. The third is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And this really means talk to the customer frequently, find out if what you're building is what they want. Keep in mind, most customers don't know what they want until they see something, and then they just know that that's not what they want. So the sooner you can get that collaboration, the better off you're going to be. And it's far better to put your effort into that collaboration and working with the customer than it is to try and hammer out an ironclad contract. So again, it's just one of those common sense things when you think about it. And then the fourth value is being able to respond to change over following a plan.
I feel like that one's almost self-explanatory. It's like if you have a plan and that plan goes awry, you should
which it will.
Yeah, which it will. You should deal with the problem at hand and not just trudge forward blindly into the problem, sticking to the plan.
Right. And that's because this way of working, known as agility or being agile, it's funny because I'll step into certain places and they're like, oh, we're doing agile. And I'm like, no, you're not, because it's not something you do. It's something you become. So if you're doing it, you're probably cargo culting it. And
you're probably what? Cargo
culting it. Yeah. So this is a common phrase. In World War II, there was a small island, I forget where it was, that was occupied by military.
Okay.
And the indigenous people on the island witnessed the military build some towers, and they would radio with headsets on, and airplanes would fly overhead and drop supplies that they needed to survive, food, ammunition, things like that. War ends, military leaves, the indigenous people utilizing bamboo and coconuts, kind of like Gilligan's Island, build a bunch of towers, make some fake headsets, and go through all of the exact same motions that they witnessed the military going through, but yet can't figure out why the airplanes don't arrive and drop boxes of food. This is referred to as cargo culting. It's when you are going through the motions of something but don't understand the underlying principles of it, and so you don't get the same results.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. So yeah, cargo culting is part of it. And following a plan, I mean, planning is essential. Plans are useless. I love to say that. It's good to do a little bit of planning, but not so much planning that you're wasting time doing planning and not actually doing.
I'm really good at that.
Planning. A lot of people are. And in older models for software delivery, the waterfall method with Gantt charts and 6 months of planning up front, and then developers would code, but they couldn't code to what the requirement was that was put together in the planning stage, because that's not how software works. And so they had to make changes on the fly to make it work. And then they hand it over to operations to implement it. And operations can't implement it because it's not built the way that the requirement was documented. And the plan says that it should work this way, but it doesn't work that way. And it just causes a big kerfuffle and mess. That is not agility. Agility is saying, you know what, what's the minimum thing that we can produce right now as a group of people? Let's get all of the right voices in the room. Let's get the person responsible for the product, the customer, a designer, a couple of developers. Let's get them all in the room right now. What's the least amount of thing we can do to move in a direction and get feedback on that? Is this what you mean? Is this what you mean? Is this what you mean? And that method works much faster with much less overhead, with much less waste than the outdated models. However, people don't like change. People are afraid of change. And people are resistant to change. And so it becomes challenging to help folks change. To help them see that it is okay to not know the answer. The Cynefin framework lays it out really well. If you're not familiar with that, I suggest you take a look at it. There's different types of work that require different approaches. And if you think back to your AI classes about, probing and sensing and responding, the way we would teach AI agents to do things, it's similar in terms of the type of work, whether it's complicated work or complex work are two very different things, and how you go about looking and feeling and responding to that changes depending on the area or the quadrants that you're in. So there are some pretty handy frameworks and it's about communication, really. You would definitely get a kick out of a lot of the stuff that I go through on a day-to-day basis for your own framework to help apply sense to them. Sense making is the hardest part of fleshing out.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here is make sense.
Yeah. I get it.
Well, speaking of which, let's dip into the next one. So next,
Sure. Did I answer the question appropriately? What is agile? What is an agile coach? I'm someone who helps people find better ways of working so they can be happy with their
yeah,
lives.
I think so. Yeah, it makes sense. Like, kind of, it sounds like overall a more human, a more efficient approach to still relatively systematic work, because we're not systematic beings. We're these biological emotion. Yeah, we're human.
Are individuals working together, and software is always different, right? Whether it's the software itself is slightly different, but the team assembling it is also different. We all have different perceptions and understandings based on our cultural background, based on our social economic background, based on our geographical background, based on our own life experiences, based on our maturity, based on our value that we're able to deliver, how we understand things, how willing we are, how psychologically safe we feel. It's very, very layered. There is a lot to it, but in a nutshell, my job is to help teams figure out how to follow Peter Drucker's great words as well as they can so that I can step away and let them just do that. Peter Drucker said, better you get, the better you better get.
Better you get, the better you better get.
Yep.
Like, that's good. Okay.
So that's the premise, really, is to help people get better at whatever it is they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Awesome. I dig that. Solid. It's like it sounds a lot like manager, but less lame.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a manager. I believe in self-organizing, folks. I don't tell people what to do. I ask them what they think they should do and then say, all right, sounds cool.
Yeah.
Let me know how that works.
Yeah, I think that's why it's called an agile coach and not an agile manager.
Exactly.
Because being a personal trainer or a fitness coach, as some people would say, I don't manage people in their workouts. I just encourage them.
Yeah, you say, oh, that I see you're doing that thing, and it looks like that's working out. Keep doing that thing. That's awesome. What else could you do now? Now that you've got that under your belt, what else could you do?
Yeah,
and you kind of make them come up with the idea. And I mean, you have the background and the understanding to know what they're going through.
Well, I mean, I come up with the ideas and I tell them what to do and they do the thing, but it's kind of the way that they do it that I just make sure they're doing it right and then let them keep going.
So it's a little controlling command.
It's kind of gotta be, if I'm going to be honest. I gotta be pretty controlling. I gotta keep people safe and I gotta make sure that they're being efficient with their workouts and not spinning their wheels. So I gotta make sure they're pushing their limits. People don't like to suffer, man. They just don't like to suffer.
Really? Why do they do so much suffering then?
They need to do more, honestly. They need to do more self-imposed suffering that makes them better.
Isn't that what thinking is about?
Thinking is suffering?
Isn't it?
Yes.
Thinking is a tool that we have. It's not who we are. You're not your thinking self. You're greater than your thinking self. But your thinking self honestly thinks that if you stopped thinking, it would die. And so it continues to think.
But your thinking self is kind of the closest thing to who you are.
No, it's not.
How is it not?
Because there's an off switch. There's
death.
There's tranquility and silence and presence and feeling.
What you're talking about, like enlightenment, where you just meditate to a point where you have zero thoughts?
It's not.
Because that's a pretty hard off switch.
It's an off switch for sure. And it's akin to that. It's not a perpetual state of it, though. It comes in smaller bursts. I've been meditating since I was about 7.
I've been meditating for a while, but not lately. I haven't been meditating enough. But
every day, dude.
I know you should.
No. I do every day, habitually.
Sorry, I should.
Everybody should.
Yes, everybody should.
Everybody should take a moment and just breathe.
I couldn't agree more with that, but I still would argue that you're still thinking.
There's moments of it. I usually tell people, hold your hands out, palms up, and just feel your palms for a minute.
Sorry, I'm only laughing because my fiance had a terrible therapist. He was having anxiety, and the therapist said, hold your palms up when you're anxious. And like, that was it. That was the advice for dealing with your anxiety.
Anxiety and depression are tricky ones. I mean, we have so much healthcare centered around band-aiding anxiety or band-aiding depression that they've overlooked that those are two symptoms of the exact same thing, which is the lack of presence.
Lack of purpose.
Well, just presence. If I'm in the present moment, there is no future projection or fiction of my mind to cause anxiety. Anxiety is a fiction of your mind where you're projecting into the future about scenarios that are going to unfold in a way that they are almost definitely not going to unfold. Depression is a fiction of the mind where we're looking into our past and reviewing something that happened in a way we didn't want it to happen.
So,
and in both of those cases, we're not in the present moment.
so I agree with that, but
Right.
I don't think that being present. So I think that there's immense value in being present. I think that there's immense value in being present in the direction of aiding in depression and anxiety. And I think the meditation, I have a client that recently that she's been struggling with some depression, and I encouraged her to meditate, noticing some small differences. The rule I gave her was sit and breathe for 3 minutes a day minimum, quietly. That's it.
That's awesome.
And she's getting benefits from that. With that said, I would argue that the future, as much as you might be able to keep your mind in the present, it's never, you can never eliminate the future. Time is ever
And
moving, and you can never
I'm not-
eliminate the past. And so some people are just
Do
in
they really
such a
exist?
shitty place that they can be as mindful in the moment as they want, but their moment is shit.
So then they're not in the moment. So that's my point. Is if you're in a present moment, if you're truly, even if it's just momentarily that you're genuinely just present, in that moment, there is no problem.
Okay, I think I get where you're going with this. You're talking like Viktor Frankl, how suffering is a choice and no one can really make you suffer. You choose to suffer in any given moment.
I mean, that's a big pill to swallow for a lot of people.
It
That's
is.
not exactly that's it's kind of what I'm saying. It's not exactly what I'm saying. If any of the people that know me in the real world hear this, they're gonna laugh because I'm gonna say, it's like that, but it's not like that. I'm pretty well known for saying that, audience. I just mean that in order to function, obviously, we have to allow our thinking self to have. That's how we avoid getting hit by cars.
It's a good skill.
Yeah, it's a great skill, right? So I'm not by any stretch of the imagination be like Mr. Buddha and the Mountaintop Man. Also, by the way, Buddha and the Mountaintop Man doesn't mean anything. The real test of enlightenment is being in the middle of chaos, not in a peaceful place.
Agreed.
And can you remain calm in that chaos? It's the continued observation that when I take the time to be present, and they're just fleeting moments, but over time they get to be slightly longer, which is good. There's an expansion that happens in that space. There are no problems just in that moment. There is no anxiety because I'm present and not in any way projecting forward that would cause the anxiety. And there is no depression in that because there is no projection into the past or thought of a past event that went in a way. So what I'm saying is that the mental health institution, like so many medical institutions, and I mean, we've talked before about this, any capitalist kind of environment knows that there is money in treatment, not in cures. They will treat people for anxiety and treat people for depression, but they're not treating them to bring them to the present moment, which is the actual solution to what's going on in their minds and lives when they suffer from anxiety and depression, is that they've gone too long without being in touch with the now. And they can't find the now, and so they've lost what the now feels like, and so they are more acclimatized and accustomed to this uncomfortableness that they feel. It's a strange thing. Wim Hof is an interesting dude. I'm pretty sure you know who Wim Hof is.
Oh yeah, I've done cold showers for years.
But not just that, the breathing stuff.
Oh, yeah, I did that for like 2 or 3 years straight, the Wim Hof breathing.
So you totally get it. You know what the present moment, because that's what that's for, is to make us present.
Yeah, I get it. Okay.
Where were we going
All
before
right.
I derailed? Damn you, French.
Oh, that's all good, man. That's what this is all about. So Cloud9, I just call it this. It's whatever. Cloud9 level of communication. So it's basically a representation of complete crystal clear communication. The most beautiful thing in existence, if you ask me. But essentially, if we imagine this Lego hologram analogy, and as we're communicating, that you and I are on such a good wavelength and we're communicating so efficiently on whatever topic we're communicating about, that it almost feels like we can see little flickers of each other's Lego structure. It's like I'm looking at you and I'm looking into your eyes and I'm understanding you so deeply that I'm understanding that you're understanding me so deeply. that moment of super clear, deep connection during conversation.
Is it just connection, or could it just be clarity in the communication?
So-
Because I can think of, and the reason I'm saying that is I can think of examples where I have written something down in relation to a video game character and then handed it to a character artist. What they drew is exactly
What was in
the
your
image
brain?
that I had in my head.
That's awesome.
Exactly. Like, how did you get that out of, and it's just because the communication was clear to a point where we understood one another. Is that
Yeah.
what you mean by
Yeah, I would say that is wonderful representation of exactly what I'm talking about. So then I guess I don't really need to continue with whether or not because I've had some people, honestly, that I give them this analogy, which is just like basically an add-on analogy to the Lego hologram. And I've had people genuinely say to me, no, that doesn't exist. And
Really?
Yeah, and it hurts me every time. Because not like I'm offended, hurt, or like, how do you
feel bad?
Exactly.
You feel bad that they've never experienced it.
Yes, thank you. I feel so bad for them that they're just like, no, that's not a real thing. And I'm just going, oh my God, how have you gone your whole life and you've never had that in your life? It's just, it's so painful.
Is that an indication maybe that their communication skills need improvement?
Arguably, yes. But then we got to get into like their history and how they were raised, and maybe their environment didn't provide an opportunity to develop the communication skills that could experience. And then like,
don't we have the ability? Don't we all have the ability to go back and self-improve?
I think so. I think we have the ability to break free and become something that is not our parents and something that is not the environment we grew up in. I think we definitely have that ability. And I think you have a responsibility once, like as soon as you turn 18 or whatever, as soon as you move out, whatever you want to set the breaking point to be, after you've spent, I don't know, 5-6 years outside of that, like you better be at least on your way to being your own person. You know what I mean?
Be accountable.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Be accountable for your own actions. Yeah.
Take responsibility for your actions.
That's awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Next. This is one of my favorites. Or are we good on that one? I think we're good on that one.
I think we're gonna.
Yeah. Next is the 0.5 analogy. Could be any points that you want, but we just called it 0.5. It's a framework for understanding appropriate use of interruptions in conversation, different forms of misunderstandings and how they occur, and deeper into the difficulty of communication. And early on, you spoke of the 3
levels of listening.
No, before that.
No, 3 agendas.
Yeah, agendas. That's it. So the 3 agendas, and that's where this ties in. The 0.5 analogy is like, as I'm explaining things, as I'm explaining this right now, I need to make a point 1, and then I need to move on to point 2. And you give me these little nods as I'm going to be like, yes, Trevor, I'm following you. Continue on your way. I'm right behind you. You're patting me on the shoulder.
I could totally be checked out if I wasn't a GTDer. I could totally be checked out and still nodding along with you, but I didn't really hear anything.
Yeah, technically, but I know that you're not checked out. Okay.
Want to make sure.
Yeah. So you could be, but I can tell so far in the conversation you're giving me the feedback right now that there's good evidence that you're following me pretty closely. And as I approach my 0.5, I need to be making these other points along the way. And this was a problem I was having with relationship. And I kind of developed this 0.5 analogy with my current relationship, because I would be trying to explain. I don't know if you noticed, I'm not a guy that talks about super simple surface stuff like how the game was the other day. I don't like those conversations. So with my significant other, I'm talking about...
I don't like small talk.
Yeah. I'm talking about these grandiose things, and I would be part way. I'd be at like 0.2.5 or something. And then she would have input that would be pushing it in a different direction. And I was making a mistake with my communication by saying yes, but I should not have. I should have said yes and, because I should have confirmed what she said and then moved on where I was going.
So interesting point, just to quickly interject.
Sure.
No, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the problem is she is getting excited about my little points along the way, and then she wants to take those in other directions. And I got this big end goal of this 0.5, and she's just unaware of it. And so it's better for me to set intention with the conversation to say, okay, I got somewhere I got to go. But realistically, with our relationship, once we had that conversation, I have set the intention for the remainder of our conversation where now she just assumes that I have this big 0.5. And now we're at a point in a relationship where quite often she will just say, is that it? Like, I was expecting more. Like, when are you done already? Like, there's got to be more to that, you know? And so when it comes to interruption can be, because I find, so to explain appropriate use of interruption using this framework, I personally believe that when you interrupt someone, if you can sense that they're on their way to a 0.5, your interruption should be to help them along the way. Your interruption should be to help them skip a point or two if you can. Or if you feel like they're going in a direction that you don't want to go, you got to express that. If you feel like the foundation that they're building of the conversation, the starting path is problematic, you got to express that early on. You can't just try and take the conversation in your own direction on your own agenda because they have an agenda and you should let them fulfill their agenda before then you take your turn to fulfill your in the conversation. So
yes, and I think that giving a little more space for that emergent agenda, because that's what was happening. That's what's happening when you say you get to point 2.5 and they want to go in a different direction. That's that emergent agenda. Emergent, knowing first and forehand what the agenda is, right? Like this, the planned agenda, the first agenda. That is letting people know, hey, I've got these 5 points I want to talk to you about. And that's as simple as it needs to be. I've got these 5 points I want to talk to you about. And as you're going through it, you've already told them there's 5 points. So if they're interrupting, to use your word, point 2, I would say let that happen because you've already laid out that there is a planned agenda. And
agreed.
So the reason I say that is some of the best discussions come out of that emergent agenda. Some of the best conversations, the best understandings, the best parts of bonding with someone else is to let the tangents happen. And I mean, you were a student of mine, so you know how I can tangent. I can tangent. I can go off. And it can turn into just, what the hell are we talking about now? And it doesn't matter because we're still enjoying ourselves at that point. As long as you go back to the planned agenda or determine that the planned agenda wasn't necessary through those emergent discussions, there's nothing wrong with that. I would say try to have a little bit of space. Letting people know what the planned agenda is up front is a requirement in my world. I mean, if somebody sends me a meeting request and there's no agenda to attach, guess what? I'll show up.
Yeah. And
because you tell me what the hell this is about.
Yeah, I love this because when you had talked about the emergent agenda before, I had kind of already in my mind tacked that on to this 0.5 analogy, because I also think about this in like kind of a hybrid way of imagining like navigating a jungle and the speaker has the map and you're following the speaker, right? And the emergent agenda is kind of another form of interruption that can be appropriate. That is, hey, look at that tree over there. That's pretty neat.
I need bubble syndrome.
Yeah. Can we just divert over that way and check that out, and we'll come back over to this, right? Like add-ons to the conversation, right?
Ooh.
Which literally your comment of shiny bubble syndrome or ooh shiny is that.
Yes, that's why I said it.
Yeah, we're getting way too meta here, Rob.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand your 0.5. 0.5 is really the 3 agendas.
Yeah.
That's really what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, that's awesome. And I find when it comes to misunderstanding, especially I've used this example before, sorry, listener, if you're navigating as a group, and sometimes it can be really hard, and sometimes it bounces back and forth all the time, you get diverged all over the place, and then you can end up at like a sheer cliff face, and there's just cliff in either direction for miles, and you're looking up, and you know that your 0.5 is just 20 feet in front of you, and your whole party is looking around going, where is it, buddy? And you're like, I don't know how I can, and you just got to abandon it because you're like, I can't navigate these people up and around these cliffs. I got to give up. I can't land my point because communication is hard.
Now,
we started
well,
with.
it could also be that you were hanging on to your planned agenda and your personal agenda and not making space for the emergent agenda, where the people you were with could have said, I don't think this is the right direction, or how are we going to get up that cliff, or any of those types of things. So this to me sounds like mistaking cooperation for collaboration, which happens way more often than we cooperate with somebody. They ask us for something and we say, yeah, no problem when we do that. And somebody asks us later, oh, did you work with so-and-so? And you're like, yeah, I totally worked with so-and-so. And you didn't work with them. You just helped them. So it's kind of like making sure that we provide the space for folks to take the agenda and run in a direction with it, because we don't all have the answer. We don't individually. And I mean, this reminds me of the sticky I have on my wall above my screen. It says WAIT, WAIT.
I was going to ask you about.
Yeah. It's there because it stands for why am I talking? As a coach, one of my responsibilities is to not talk a lot. As a coach, one of the things I do is talk a lot. So it's like the running joke in the community about, sorry, I'm a coach and I'm still talking. So I have a sticky that says wait, which just reminds me, why am I talking? And you have to get good at uncomfortable silences, especially when you're working with teams that don't yet have a good enough sense of psychological safety. So the way that you encourage them to speak up is through awkward silence. Most people will crack when it comes to awkward silence. Somebody has to fill the silence with sound, and that's how you get the conversation moving again. So I would say part of communication is also in the silence.
Agreed.
Framework.
What's that?
I don't know if that's included in any of your framework.
I mean, silence is going to be just a form of communication. It's not really in any of the frameworks, but the point within the current framework that we're discussing, silence can just be that although you know where you want to go, you know what your agenda is, you're just curious based on the current location of where you've navigated to at the moment, where your partner is going to then take it. And you don't think that you're going to get lost if they take it in any direction. So you could just use silence to watch them take it where they want to take it.
Yeah. Or you could also ask for direct feedback. What do you think? How does that sit with you?
Yep. But that's not silence anymore. You were asking about silence specifically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was asking if silence was part of any of your framework.
It's not part of it. No, I'm just saying it can fit in if it needs to.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we're understanding on the 0.5.
Yep.
Yeah. And
3 agendas.
It's the 3 agendas essentially. The next is the egg game. So it's a framework for understanding debates and morals and how people change their mind. And it's the foundation of it is similar to the Lego hologram. So these floating holograms between us, we can't see each other's, and we each have an egg. And every time we talk or say something, colliding our eggs together to test their durability. You know, people take like M&Ms and they press them together to see which one's the strongest. Do that? Sorry.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Forget that part.
Together like M&Ms.
You've never done that? You see which M&M's the strongest. Someone listening has done this. You eat the weak one. Anyways, you take the 2 eggs.
I'm doing this the next time I have M&Ms. This is how I'm going to eat my M&Ms. Is I'm going to have, and then there will be one victor.
You got it. Exactly. Find the strongest M&M. You send it back to the company so they can use it to breed to make more. So you collide the eggs together, and every time we basically say something, if you and I are debating something essentially, or there's something we don't agree on, each time we say something, rather than adding a piece of Lego to the structure, we're kind of colliding our eggs to see which one is stronger. And each egg has a durability. And so you're a coder. So each egg is a variable that is durability. That's between 0 and 100. And durability can never be 100 ever. And you as an individual have a variable that is your ability to communicate. And that ability to communicate is like a factor that augments the number that is the durability. So multiplies, divides, whatever. So it's, I don't know how to, like if you have bonus attack power, you have a base attack power, you get a buff or something and it multiplies it. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. Yeah. I'm curious why you're making this more complex.
I don't have an answer to that, Rob.
You said the M&Ms, you're going to press the M&Ms together.
Oh, that was an off thing.
Right, but is that not what you mean by the egg framework? Where you're going to debate and the strong answer is the one that's going to remain and move forward?
That's the idea. It kind of needs to be a little bit more complicated because debating and morals and the changing of a human's mind on a certain set of morals is so complicated. So I can only represent my egg so well, and I can only understand you and the way you represent your egg so well. So if my ability to represent my egg based on my communication, my relationship with you, the things you've mentioned before, respect and trust and all those variables, because they all matter, maybe that caps my ability to represent a certain egg at 80. But in my mind, in my mind's eye, I can see that that egg is a 92 something, right? But I can only represent it so well because I can only communicate so well. You can only understand that communication so well. And we only have X, Y, and Z level of relationship, right? And then all is the same vice versa. And it takes so long and it's so difficult to actually represent an egg to your fullest because as you're talking and communication is hard and it takes a long time to fully represent your side on something, and you can't know a person because you haven't spent all of the time with them. So you can't know all of the possible positions and perspectives that they could have in their life. So conversation has to be long and drawn out and complex to eventually be able to get to a point where you're almost representing to your egg to your fullest. And then you might see some progress with those kind of conversations. And progress might mean a slight fracture in someone's egg, maybe a little chip off the top. Yeah.
Wouldn't you just want to say, this is my egg and let it stand on its own merits?
Yeah. What do you mean?
I mean, why?
Why add the numbers?
No, why try and convince someone
You're
to
not.
change their mind?
You're not. So that's a really good point. Can I finish? I'll round this off here with that point.
Okay.
The goal of the game, if you're playing it properly, is to break your own egg.
Right.
But you can't
why not
break it unless you've represented it fully.
Why not have it represent itself fully? And like really what you're doing is you're saying, I've built a thing and I'm showing it to the world and I want them to find the cracks in it.
Yes.
And they're going to do that naturally just by saying, here's this thing I built. What do you think of it? And then, reassuring them that they're not going to hurt your feelings or your ego, or you're not going to get upset or mad or any of those things because whatever their life experiences have taught them to be polite over direct or honest. And so they try to sugarcoat things or give it to you in a hamburger or whatever the analogy is for managing that. Why not just say, here's this thing. What do you think? And then waiting.
Yeah, that's what the egg game is.
Okay. It seemed more involved the way you described it. It seemed like we had to hit it against another egg, and we had to see, I don't know, maybe the M&Ms.
All right, I'll leave the M&M part next time. Yeah, so basically as the conversation's going, you're kind of, because each time I say something, if you and I are debating a topic, if we're in disagreement on something, each time I say something, I'm trying to better represent my side. And then each time you say something, you're trying to better represent your side. So it's this idea that you're trying to better polish your egg. You're trying to better represent its durability, whatever, with each little statement back and forth. And so we get to a point where I've exhausted my ability to represent my egg. And then you make a point that represents your egg on the same topic as slightly more durable than mine. And that's the moment where we hit, you make a point, I counter, I make a point, you counter, until I make a point, you counter, and then I don't have a counter to that. And that's kind of this breaking point moment where I've represented my egg as an 82 and then you represent yours as an 84. And I kind of go, okay, yeah, that seems a little better, right? And it doesn't necessarily, you can sometimes have moments that are very, very rare in life where someone can say something, they can make a point that just absolutely decimates your egg, where you're just like, yeah, mine's awesome, this is great. And then you like represent it really good in conversation. And then they say one thing, they make one point that makes you go, holy shit, I never thought of that. And your egg is basically shattered and you need to rebuild it. But that's rare.
I think that the analogy of the egg is what is causing me the most challenge. If
Would
we're
you prefer
debating a
M&Ms?
point, well, no. I think, and tell me if I'm crazy, but I think that what you're saying is that during debates, we state our case and then allow the feedback to come around that case. And depending on what that feedback is, we either respond to it because there was a misunderstanding or an unclear aspect of what our case was. Is that not just the premise of debate?
Yeah, it's the premise of debate.
So I don't understand why we need an egg and we need hit points and dexterity.
So where this comes, I like video games, Rob. So where this comes into play is, for example, the main reason why I built this framework is because one of the most common misunderstandings I found in life was couples would have someone come home from work or wherever, and they'd say, "Oh, hey, I heard this thing, or I saw this video, or I talked to this guy, and yada yada yada, new perspective." And then the partner goes, "Are you fucking kidding me? I've been telling you that for how many years? And now you think that because you heard it from X, Y, and Z?" Like, that happens so much. And when people,
so it sounds like one partner wasn't really listening to the other partner.
No, that's unfair. That's very unfair.
What you just said sounds to me like one partner wasn't really listening to the other partner. Bullshit. And the other partner got a little butthurt when somebody else explained it in a way that made sense to them. It's like, did you ever watch Modern Family?
No. That's bullshit. Because it's not about them not listening. Because some people only have an ability to communicate in a certain way. And then other people only have an ability to understand in a certain way. And not everyone
I do not agree with that.
Okay.
My experience has not shown me that. People have a preferred way to communicate, but that does not imply that they cannot communicate outside of the way that they prefer.
That's a fair point. Yes. Okay, I agree with that. That's a better way of saying it. And so we can't expect all people to be, I'm sure you and I would both like all people to be more aware of their communication, put more effort into it, try and grow it and develop it. But with that said,
it's easier.
Yeah, it would. A lot easier. That's kind of the goal of all of this, is I want people to be communicating better and putting more effort into it. With that said,
hold on. Let me stick a pin there for a second. I do believe that you have a certain cognitive bias from the get-go that this is built on, and that is the communication sucks. And I think that bias might be taking you to build additional pieces of a framework that aren't necessarily required and could be summarized in a different way.
Okay. So then how do we rebuild this egg game analogy and make it different? Because, and I want to get back to me asking you that. I want to give you space for that. I want to round off. When someone is, like in the relationship example I gave, it's not that the individual who had been trying to tell the person this message all along was necessarily failing at trying to tell them the message. And I don't necessarily think that it's fair to say that they weren't communicating well enough to represent it either, because quite often these people know each other better than anyone else knows each other. And I think that sometimes you come across information because we are heavily influenced by our environment and the things that we perceive. So I think that sometimes you just get information from an individual or from a source or in a location or at a time that may cause that little bit of last bit of damage, your egg. But the person that was telling you all along hasn't done nothing. They have been chipping away the whole time. And it was that last little straw that broke the camel's back that actually caused the change. Because some people, the reason why people get offended when they're like, oh, you listen to the X, Y, and Z person or source and you haven't listened to me for 5 years, is they don't take into account that those last 5 years of them trying so hard to get them to understand was the majority of the work. And this last thing was just the straw. It was the last key. It was the keystone to connect the arc of thoughts so that they could truly understand. And it could not have possibly came from that person because they needed to receive the information from a different set, source, and setting.
Okay. I can see that there is some truth that Sometimes having multiple sources of information can help crystallize or solidify ideas in our head and make sense of them. They can help us make sense based on where we are, what time of day it is, what we ate for breakfast, what kind of mood we're in, what our interactions have been like, all of those things.
And I think the individual too.
Oh, for sure. There's an element of this that seems to be either assuming or oblivious to the clear understanding that disagreement only happens when one or more parties does not feel heard and has a greater desire to be heard than to hear. Like, that's the root of all conflict. The root of all conflict is I'm saying something, you're saying something. I feel that I'm not being heard. And so I get louder because I need to be heard, completely oblivious to the fact that you're also in the same boat and you don't feel heard. And this is why Lao Tzu said victory goes to he who yields, because he who yields will shut up and listen, right? And within doing that, they are making sure that the person speaking feels heard, and they are actually hearing, and not just hearing, they are understanding or comprehending. There's not enough words in the English language. Probably one of your beefs with the whole communication with ugh, and look at my hand gestures. So I think it would be good to clarify or find a foundation somewhere in these frameworks about that point on conflict and about how conflict arises because people don't feel as though they are heard. Simply because in your analogy of the egg, he comes home and says, oh, I saw this thing or heard this thing and she's like, are you kidding me? And that is a like an exemplary version of exactly the point of conflict, which is that person didn't feel heard as a result of him clicking into this thing, which wasn't the point. But I just think that it should be somewhere included in the frameworks as like here's the rules of the game. Here are the heuristics that we're going to put in place around these frameworks as a common understanding. And do we have that common understanding? And I mean, you started off with a bunch of this because we went through a bunch of that. And I just think that the conflict point might help. And the analogy, it makes a good example to say, the Cobb salad. I don't know if do you watch Modern Family?
I've seen.
Listeners, do you watch Modern Family? Have you seen the Cobb salad episode? Anyway, his buddy tells him to try Cobb salad. He tries it. He loves it. And his wife loses her mind because she's been telling him for years to just try the damn Cobb salad. And it's like a big thing, but he doesn't know what she's pissed off about. And if you've ever watched Modern Family, it's like another episode of Comedy of Errors ensues. And there's good tension. And I enjoy the show. I think there might be a better way, because really the crux of the egg framework isn't about that conflict. It's about the paradigm shift.
Yes. Can I pause you?
Yeah.
So I love that you said this. I have on my list of my notes that I'm going through, 2 points down, says conflict is misunderstanding. All conflict can be solved with better communication. And I used to have that point higher in the list. I used to touch on that after communication sucks. Which is a bias. Right. For this conversation, for some reason, I looked over my notes and I moved it down because I felt it was only important to touch on later.
Huzzah! We learned something new.
Yeah. That
point needs to be higher in the list. Excellent.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Back
move that up. So basically, yeah, you're absolutely right. The whole situation of the example that I gave with the couple or whatever, and the one individual being like, why didn't you listen to me, is just misunderstanding. And that is kind of why I built this framework, because once they understand this framework and how minds change over time, or how minds can change over time, how it can take that keystone of information to change someone's mind or change someone's perspective. And it may be literally impossible to come from you as an individual. Becomes a lot becomes a lot easier to accept that situation. And it was just the other day, like 2 days ago, that my fiance, and we've talked about all of these together in depth, that she was like, I said something and she was like, well, yeah, but I've been telling you that for so long. And then I was like, and she's like, well, you didn't listen to me. And I was like, you're currently going against the egg game. That's the whole point of the egg game. Based on the egg game, that you did the work to get me here, that me listening to that little podcast or whatever it was just the last little bit, that the majority of it is thanks to you. He kind of went, Oh, yeah, good point.
I wonder if you should call it just the tipping point game.
Tipping point?
Yeah, it's the tipping point. You've reached critical mass for some reason that's allowed you to sway your opinion. You've gathered enough sources or information around a given topic that cause you to change your mind or understand something differently or from a different perspective.
So the reason why I don't love
again, I've got some cognitive bias for some reason about the egg game.
And you know what? You're not the first one. And I'm trying to remain as open to it as possible, because the point of the egg game is to get your eggs broken. And I have an egg about the egg game.
The point of the tipping point game is to be tipped.
Yes. Yes. But what I'm telling you right now is I'm trying to stay open to you breaking my egg or tipping my point, or however you want to say. My issue that I see with the tipping point game is that tipping point is based on like I think of like a stick that is on an arc and you can be pushed from side to side. The point is that it doesn't always just flip over. That like sometimes you can have a conversation with someone, and throughout that conversation, say I'm representing my egg and my egg's an 82, and through our conversation we talk and talk and talk, and you're challenging it and challenging it, and I learn things through the conversation. I am then better able to represent my egg next time I have that conversation. It might be an 86 now, right? And
so at some point in the future, there will be a straw that breaks the camel's back, and it will no longer be the egg game.
That's entirely possible. Yeah, I think so. If someone gives me something better, because I don't think tipping point works, because that's too definitive. That's a flop and a flop. And I don't love that, because if we imagine a scale of 1 to 100, you can dial that up a little bit. You can dial it down a little bit. An egg can crack a little. It can fracture. It can soften.
It's not going to heal. It's always going to be cracked.
Right. And that's another good point, is that if you crack an egg a little bit, it's always going to be cracked until you take on a new egg, right? So, because if you and I are having this debate and you get to
coming from a guy like where are we getting these eggs? Are we buying them in bulk? What happens if we drop it on the floor? I hear what you're trying to say. I don't know that that's the right analogy for it. I understand what you're saying.
Give me a better one.
The challenge is that we're all individuals, and so we all have different things about us. Take optical illusions. The woman and the horse as an example. There's a great famous optical illusion, or the ballerina spinning forward or spinning backwards. There are some people in the world that can only see one or the other of those ways and can't see both. Most of those optical illusions, I can see both. I think there's only been a few where I'm like, I don't see that other thing, so I can only see one of them. But
this egg thing, you're really struggling to see.
Well, I'm struggling to see how this analogy makes sense, because I don't walk around with eggs. I don't think any of my beliefs are like eggs.
How would you better represent your beliefs? What do you want them represented as? It's just a placeholder value. It's just a placeholder. It's like, it can be anything.
I think we can come up with a better placeholder is what I'm saying.
Give me a better placeholder.
I'm distracted by that placeholder of the egg. An optical illusion. The spinning ballerina. She's only spinning right until at some point something happens, and now you can see that she's spinning left. And if you chose, you could go back to seeing her spinning right, and you would have the understanding that it just depends on the way that you're looking at it. Perspective is everything. Actually, I have a graphic that I use all the time.
That's still a tipping point, though. That's still flipping from one to the other, and it's not necessarily how those things go.
So it's not that the egg was wrong. The cracking of the egg is like breaking down something. It's not.
Because quite often people can have their beliefs damaged and still walk around with damaged beliefs, and they still hang on to them because it's the best they got, but they're slightly compromised. And then they might not just come across something, like you could come across something that will then deal the final blow to break that weakened egg, or you can equally as likely come across a new egg that is still in your court. It's still on your side of the playing field of whatever the belief is, but it's just a better representation of your egg. And so then you just pick up this new egg and you discard the old one.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that analogy.
That's okay. That's why I'm doing this.
I totally get what you're saying. That analogy, not my favorite.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying. And I agree. There can be, I don't think it's a hard and fast rule though. I think that there are different things. What book was it? a very famous book. They give the analogy in the beginning about paradigm and what does it mean to be a paradigm. And there's a guy who gets on the subway train and he gets on the train with his kids, and his kids are just running around and causing a ruckus and aggravating the passengers. And he's not paying any attention to them at all. And this person on the train is like really frustrated by this because the kids are running around, right? And so they say, "Sir, can you do something?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. We just came from the hospital where their mother passed away." And that causes that paradigm shift in that person who was previously frustrated with them, with empathy and understanding of why this person might not be paying attention. And so it's not that you can't still see what caused the frustration, because you can still see what caused the frustration, but now you can also see why that behavior is present in the sullen bloke with his kids. So is that the moral of the story or the moral of the framework, or is it
you're the example you're giving is a flip. It's like a tipping point situation, right?
It is, but it's with the context that I can still go back to the previous paradigm. I can still look at it from the other point of view. I'm not forced to only see it from this new point of view.
Yeah, but what's useful about looking at it from the older point of view?
Lots of times. There's plenty of,
I just meant in that example. Like, I mean, you see that guy's clearly in a rough way. What's the point in going back to thinking he's a negligent father that's a dickhead? I don't see any use in that.
It's not about there being a usefulness, but it's like being softer with yourself in terms of understanding that you misunderstood something.
Right. So I would argue that you're not necessarily going back. You're reminiscing on what you had thought, and you're using that as a learning experience to move forward and potentially be less judgmental. You're not going back to the old perspective because your paradigm is shifted. Once your paradigm is shifted, you cannot possibly think from a previous paradigm. That's why it's a paradigm shift. Whatever paradigm you're in at any given moment determines how you think. As soon as your paradigm shifts, you think different. You can't go back.
But you can still be aware of how you previously viewed it.
You can try to maintain as much memory about it.
What about when multiple paradigms are equally valid?
That's useful. Yeah.
Can't find this image. There's an image of three people, it's a cartoon image. There's three characters. Each one is describing what they see. None of them agree with it, but they are each looking at different sides of the same shape. One of them sees it as a triangle, one of them sees it as a square, and one of them sees it as a circle. And they are all correct, but they are all also incomplete. And it's only in having that collaboration and communication between them that they get to uncover that they are in fact all right, but there is more to see from it than just that one point of view.
Right. And sometimes you can...
That's a paradigm shift where it's useful to look at it from other perspectives.
Understand the shape of something?
To better have a common understanding and agreeance for alignment purposes, yes.
Yeah. So you're talking about just basically paradigm shift.
No, because I'm not talking about just seeing it from the new perspective only, as you put, with what use is it to go back to seeing them as...
But once you have someone else's perspective, that's a new paradigm, because it's a combination of your perspective and their perspective, which is a paradigm you did not have previously.
Yes.
But
that doesn't imply that your perspective was wrong, just limited.
Yes. But you can't go back to your old perspective.
You can go back to see how you were looking at it.
Well, sorry, you can go back to your old perspective, but you can't go back to your old paradigm.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Not enough words in the English language.
Yeah, I know. Communication sucks.
No, that it sucks. I'm having a good time.
I'm having a great time.
All right.
Okay, so you don't like the eggs. I'm super open to something different. It just needs to be able to fulfill the same variables that I've discussed so far. Like someone's egg being slightly damaged and then being able to hang on to it. Like someone having it change slowly over time before it becomes something else. Like it being reinforced on the side it's already on over time, or abandoned and taking on something new without it being broken at all. Like there's just so many different variables. And I have found that using an egg and giving the density of the egg a variable from 0 to 100, and knowing that they can never be 100, because that's an important point, and having the rule that you want your egg to break, are all rules that I have found very useful so far. And if you can give me another analogy and another set of rules, I'm happy to replace this.
I've just asked a colleague to send me the damn image because I'm not on my work machine, which I use this image all the time. And I just want to send you this image and say, what would you call that shape?
Okay.
Because that shape would summarize what it is you're talking about, minus the crack. I mean,
Okay.
it's funny
It's
because
got to encompass all the variables, right?
oh yeah, for sure. And I think it does. I think it does.
Okay, so I'm supposed to use a
It's
shape
not like,
instead?
It's not like if you crack your egg, you can perceive your egg cracked, right?
No.
Perfection is a cracked coffee
Well,
cup. It's
you
perfect.
can try and ignore it, which a lot of people do, right? They can have the information in their head and just move forward as if their egg is pristine.
So they can delude themselves.
Yes,
And
exactly.
they're welcome to do that.
Exactly.
There's a ton of flat earthers out there.
Yeah, right. And then they'll get to a point where I'm sure you've seen the videos where the flat earthers prove themselves wrong, where they conduct an experiment.
What, you mean somebody asked them why it's called an atmosphere and they couldn't answer?
No, I more meant I've seen like an experiment with like lasers where some guys like, if the earth is round, this laser is going to show up here. And if it's flat, it'll show up here. And then it shows up in the spot
In the
that he
place
didn't
that proves
want.
that it's round.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And he
Power to them. Hey,
Yeah.
believe what you want.
Yeah.
No cracks in the egg.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What's the next frame? I don't have an answer for what else to call it at this point, but I definitely will find that image and send it to you.
Okay. And if you come up with something and like maybe if you want to do this again sometime, come up with a system, an analogy that is more effective than this. I am so open to. Okay. Next, pinpoint or dinner plate. An attempt at explaining different levels of specificity and complexity of thoughts, kind of macro micro conversation. A lot of what we're talking about is like dialing things down, super pinpoint conversations, and a lot of day-to-day conversations are just dinner plates. Pretty simple.
I mean, I have to do that on a day-to-day basis, depending on the layer of the organization I'm communicating with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, teams are interested in one perspective of how something is going. Middle management is interested in a different level of detail. Senior management is interested in a different level of detail.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to communicate at the appropriate level to the appropriate level of detail is important.
Yeah. And I find that this can, much as you don't love the egg game, this can tie into the egg game where people will be debating you on like hockey puck size topics, and then you're debating them on that topic, and then they make a point, dials it down to a toonie, and you're like, okay, if you want to discuss that specific of a thing, we can, but that's not what we're discussing. That's not a point in your favor.
Well, I wouldn't say that's not a point in your favor because that would cause people to take offense.
No, you don't literally say that. I'm just saying like, are we going to talk about the hockey puck or are we going to talk about the toonie? Like you got to make up your mind. We can dial down and talk about the toonie and discuss that and then dial back up to the hockey puck if you want. But
is everyone here interested in looking at it at the toonie level?
Yeah.
Or should we maintain looking at it from the hockey puck?
Yeah.
And then determining what everybody wants.
Yeah.
Even a Roman
Exactly.
even a Roman vote works.
A Roman vote. What's that?
A Roman vote is thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb sideways.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I dig it.
Yes, no, don't care.
Yeah, that one's pretty simple.
Or fist of 5, right? 1 through 5. Everybody holds up their hand at the same time with a value on it.
And how much they care. Yeah, that's good.
Exactly it.
So that one's
about being interactive with folks.
Yeah, that one's. I'm guessing we're on the same page with that one. Pretty simple.
Okay.
Yeah, and then my next one.
What did you call that one?
Pinpoint or dinner plate.
Sure.
Yeah, and I like realistically, it sounds silly, but I use these as tools in my relationship so much. And that's why I'm kind of trying to stress test these because I want to make them better. Like, you don't love the egg game, which is fucking love that. I love
what really matters though is what does your partner think about the egg game?
She loves it.
Okay.
She loves all of these.
It makes a good analogy for her.
Yes.
Right.
But I don't.
Now, if we were partners, I would be like, yeah, we can't use eggs. This doesn't make sense.
Not my type, Rob.
This is right.
No, you're totally my type. Who am I kidding? So
you got all the wrong parts, but sorry. I know how all your parts work.
Okay, so she loves all of these. Well, I don't know if she loves all. She tolerates them at the very least.
Tolerates them.
Yeah, at the very least. But they've been immensely useful in our relationship, and we use them all the time in conversation. Is like the last 2 days, I know that we've referenced the egg game. I know that we've referenced the pinpoint or dinner plate. In the last month, we've probably
benefit of shared language.
Yes, exactly. Because when you use these as tools, and she points it out all the time, where I'll say something, she'll bring up a topic because it's natural to just start a conversation out of thin air all the time. And you won't set her intentions, and I'll interject or I'll make a point or something, and I'll be moving in a different direction, and she'll go, no, 0.5. And I'm like, oh, okay. And now I know that she's got a whole fucking thing that she's going to. So I just sit back and I let her take it. And all she has to say is 0.5, which sounds ridiculous, but it means so much.
Yep, 100%. Right? Shared language.
Yeah. Yeah.
The importance of having a shared understanding. And this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation where we were talking about communication. And I said, we're using the same protocols. All that is you're laying out a different set of protocols or a different understanding of those protocols to be able to short form certain larger topics into shorter frames.
Yes, that's basically what I want to do with all of these. That's what the goal is with all of this, is to take these long form conversations that we're doing now about complex things and turning them into simple, quick things like Lego points and eggs, right?
Lego points and eggs. These three things don't even go together, man.
They're not supposed to. Maybe I'll change them all and try and put them all together as one later on down the road.
A unified theory of everything. Isn't that what we're all after?
That's what I would love to do with all of this. Yeah, that would be sweet. It's just bring it all together as one thing. I just haven't taken the time to try and figure out analogies that would overlap better. These all manifested individually to solve individual problems, not to become one big system.
Gotcha.
Right? Yeah.
We love models. All models are broken.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I don't think I want to think that maybe if I try to create one big thing where they all interconnect and adjust them all so that they can interconnect easier, maybe that'll just take away from each one. No.
Do you need all of them for a system of systems to work, or will the system operate solely on the individual frameworks?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to use my relationship as an example, that operates exceptionally well with each individual framework on their own.
So then you don't need to build a system of systems.
Okay.
You could keep them separate, independent or interdependent.
Much as
Although
you like how
you made it so there was, if you made it so it was, loose coupling, then you could interchangeably switch certain elements in and out time with relativities.
Yeah.
It might help in the learning progression of these. People learn, and if they can build upon previous knowledge, it's easier for them than from coming at it from a complete abstract, no understanding of what the hell you're talking about, POV.
Yeah, I do try, like, as you've noticed, I do try and refer back to previous ones as I go.
Yes.
But I can see how it might be difficult for people to be like
with the exception of the pyramid. And honestly, I think that when you do the pyramid, you could incorporate the mind the gap with the pyramid, because you said the pyramid starts with you.
Yes.
And then there's minding the gap. And the gap is between you and the others.
Yes.
So it helps round out the pyramid as well as the minding the gap.
Okay, so you're like nesting the minding the gap within the pyramid.
Essentially, because I mean, you said the pyramid was me.
No,
and
and
so minding the gap sits between those naturally and makes perfect sense.
I like what you just did there. So the relationship with the self is the peak, and then the gap is between the peak.
So it's a floating peak, because we are our own perspectives of the universe, completely unique to ourselves based on our upbringing and the way we've learned lessons and what we learned and how we learned it and what impact that had and how we turned those into belief systems. And there's the other piece that I haven't heard anything else about yet. So I'm going to shut up and see if you touch on it. Go.
What other piece?
Belief systems.
Belief systems. That's the egg game.
Sorry?
That's the egg game.
It's not, though. Wasn't. Belief system. Egg game for me was about paradigm shifts.
Can be.
It wasn't about belief systems.
It can be.
Yeah, I totally didn't get the egg thing then.
So your egg is a representation of everything that you've experienced and how you feel about something.
That is not a point in your favor.
Okay.
For it being an egg. A belief system is something we have locked in and just accepted as truth.
You can't, because then that's an egg that's 100. Playing the game right.
But we have belief systems that are ingrained, and we never question them.
I don't think you should never question it.
Oh, I'm right with you. I'm big on challenge all the assumptions and do the thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can play the word game with someone to help them uncover where they have an unhealthy belief system. And the way you play this is, I'm going to say a phrase and I'm going to end it with blank. And you're going to not think about, but just respond with the first thing that comes to mind to fill that blank.
Okay.
Right? You ready?
So you're going to say something.
I'm gonna say a really short sentence.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end it with blank.
Okay.
And you're going to fill the blank in
just with one word.
With the first thing that comes to mind. Yes.
I'm only limited to one word.
You are limited to the first thing that comes to mind. Just the one first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, but a thing can be a phrase. I just want to make sure I understand the rules of the game.
This is how we figure out what our belief systems are.
Okay.
This is what this game is about.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
And you can do it with anything, but I'm going to pick something that I think is I'm going to bat 100 right here.
All right.
Ready?
Yep.
Fitness is
amazing.
Amazing. Perfect. And that's in alignment with you, right? Because you think fitness is amazing. That's your belief system. And when you say the word amazing, close your eyes for a second and say the word amazing.
Amazing.
Think of all of the things that come to your mind around amazing.
A lot of good stuff.
A lot of really good stuff, right? Because it's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So when you think of fitness, all of those influences from all of those things related to amazing are what come to mind.
Yes.
Now, if you said to someone, here's a different one, right? We'll do it again. Relationships are blank.
Hard.
What was the first? Hard. Now close your eyes and think of the word hard and think of all the things that come to mind.
They're very similar to the things that come to mind with amazing.
Really?
Yes.
But they weren't hard? They weren't hard things?
No, they were. That's what makes them
they
amazing.
Were hard things.
Yes.
Okay. That's what makes it amazing.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a healthy relationship. In a lot of cases, people would have like an adverse reaction. They would say, you could do it with money is and blank. People would be like frustrating or whatever. And then you get them to unwrap that word that they've said and explain to them, listen, this is your belief system. This is just a game of what's true right now. And what's true right now is you have this relationship with that thing as your belief system, as your core belief system. The good news is you can always swap your belief systems, but you first have to understand what your current belief system is. And now then you go into what would you like that to be? So maybe for relationships, you also want it to be amazing. And then I would just get the person to focus on those amazing things and put it with that structure, right? Relationships are amazing. Or what
kind of relationships are we talking about? Because
it doesn't matter, all relationships, right? I wasn't specific.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I said hard, because like my relationship with my fiance at this point is now way easier. Yeah, like super easy.
You've gone through the growing of a human, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody.
Thank you. But no. Good job, her. Don't good job me.
No. Good job. Absolutely. Unequivocally, good job, her.
I did the fun part.
And good job, you, because as a human being occupying the same space with another human being that is growing a human being inside of them. Wow. Been there, done that. Bought the t-shirts, finally finished paying for the t-shirts. Yeah. Good job.
You know what? Speaking of which, why don't we do a couple more? I would love to do this again sometime if you're game.
For sure. Anytime, buddy.
Awesome. Why don't we round this off, because you're reminding me of my baby girl and how bad I want to see her. Hopefully she's not in bed already.
Good job.
So
did anybody teach you the great secret? It's too late now, but did anybody teach you the great secret?
The great secret. Let's hear it.
The great secret for all the new parents out there listening. I have the great secret, but you have to do this as soon as you bring the baby home from the hospital. You have to do this right away.
What if you have a home birth?
Sure. As soon as the baby's born.
Okay.
You do it. You do it starting immediately in order for the great secret to work. Doctors will tell you, midwives will tell you, babies have their parents trained within 2 days. Within 2 days, they have their parents trained. They know exactly what sounds to make to evoke what kind of reaction. Within 2 days. This is how intelligent we are as a species. Immediately, when you bring a baby home from the hospital, one of the first things you want to do is you want to get your bedtime routine figured out. And it doesn't matter what time bedtime is, but you want a routine to signal, to symbolize it is now bedtime. Whether that's baby gets a bath, baby gets a bottle, baby gets some burps, baby gets some tickles, baby gets a story read to baby, and baby goes into the bassinet, just as an example. Fill it in with your own ritual, with your own routine, but you be consistent with that routine. And you try to be consistent with the time that you're doing that routine initially, because as creatures, we do interpret, rhythms to things. Our brain is amazing at matching patterns. Once you put the baby to bed, even if the baby's sleeping in your room, right? A lot of parents come home, put the bassinet in their own room. They want to be close. Mom is exhausted, has just gone through squeezing a watermelon out of her body, is really sore, is really freaked out. If you're first time parents, you're totally freaked out about, dropping this thing, breaking this thing, hurting this thing inadvertently, things suffocating, you lose sleep, you worry, all these things. Should there be pillows in there? Should there not be pillows in there? The specialists change their mind every couple of years to keep everybody on their toes, yada, yada, yada. The point is, you have a ritual that you stick to every night, same time. And when you put the baby to bed, you stop speaking to the baby. You do not talk to the baby. The baby needs to be fed, feed the baby. No coochie coo, no daddy loves you, no mommy loves you. Don't speak to the baby. Feed the baby. Baby needs to be burp the baby. Don't speak to the baby. Baby needs to be changed. Change the baby. No, oh, you're such a good boy. No, oh my God, what did you eat? Do not speak to the baby. And it's hard. But if you can do that for a couple of weeks and then continue that, after a couple of weeks, it gets a lot easier because you have this routine. The baby is now associating that routine with quiet time. The baby's still going to wake up in the middle of the night for the first 3 to 6 months and scream its full head off if it's got gas or is hungry or has a shitty ass. But around the 6-month mark, baby's now got a pretty good cycle. If the baby wakes up in the middle of the night, because babies will do that, because we're born polyphasic, meaning we sleep multiple times in a 24-hour window, the baby, if they don't need anything, it's going to play quiet, their fingers, toes, and not just fucking scream. That's why it's called The Great Secret. Worked with both my daughters.
I love this. And I'm glad I kind of let you run with that, because you're talking about how it doesn't really work until 6 months. And because I didn't do enough reading about this, I'm trying to run my gym and do my thing, and I'm being the best dad I can be. And she's doing all of the parent style stuff and reading that kind of stuff and staying at home and take care of the baby and letting me know what she reads. And from that, I did not read that. She has explained to me that apparently sleeping, they don't know how to put themselves to sleep. They don't know how to
self-soothe.
Yeah, engage sleep mode. They don't know how to turn that on, I guess turn off. And they can't regulate a circadian rhythm within the first 6. It's impossible. They just don't do that. So I love that because partway through, as you were giving that explanation, I wanted to be but Rob, but
wait a second.
Yeah,
you had a first level of listening, but you held on. Good job.
Yeah, I just had to wait for you to get to 0.5.
Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to tell you 0.5.
No, I just knew that you were going somewhere. I just had to wait patiently. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's awesome. I love that. We'll have to implement something like that for our second. We're already coming up on 1 year old.
The Great Secret.
Days. Great Secret it is. Okay.
And I don't know why it's not written about, but my dad told me about it. So.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's really good advice. So
we'll have to get together because we didn't get to talk about polyphasic sleeping and what it's like to only sleep for 25 minutes at a time.
Yeah, and I so badly want to talk to you about that because I have honestly, is it?
Oh my God.
Man, I have thought about trying the Uberman cycle for a decade or more.
I had thought about it for a decade too. And finally I had an opportunity because of my work schedule. And I just said to my wife, listen, I want to do a 30-day trial. If you come home from work and I'm sitting on the roof and I'm ready to fly, experiment's over. If my behavior changes, experiment's over. If you notice anything weird, experiment's over. But I have this opportunity. I have this 6-day window where I don't need to be anywhere. I don't need to function. I don't need to operate any heavy machinery. And I'm taking the opportunity. All right.
I got to cut you off. We got to talk about that more next time. The Uberman sleep cycle. We'll talk about that. I love it.
I did 14 months in total, 10 months and then 4 months.
2 questions. One of the most famous things that I heard from you is don't fuck with dragons.
Yes.
Always initialize your pointers.
Always.
Do you think dragons were real?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? I think that the consciousness time space that we currently occupy with all of the Mandela effects and all of the weirdness that people experience is a result of what Marvel calls the multiverse. I think that consciously our consciousness follows our decisions based on what we've made, but that does not mean that the other choice didn't happen. It just means consciously we're not paired with it.
So are you saying that dragons might have existed in another universe?
I think that there's a parallel universe or many parallel universes where they still exist. But I also think time is a complete illusion and that all times are simultaneous.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I've heard someone say that it would be impossible for a dragon fossil to exist or
Yeah,
very, very
you know what?
difficult because if they were to fly, their bones would have to be hollow like birds. It would be very difficult to come
Do
across.
you, do you know what I would say to that?
What?
I would say, according to physics, bumblebees can't fly. From a
Yes.
physics standpoint,
No, they're saying
bumblebees
that if,
cannot fly.
yes, but they're saying that if dragons existed, they should have, it's entirely possible that they exist. And they're saying that within them existing, they would have had to have had hollow bones because
The
dense.
assumption.
Oh, maybe.
I hear what you're saying. I
Yeah.
mean, pterodactyls to birds, they all have hollow bones.
Yeah.
But does that mean that that's the way it's always been? What if
I
the
don't know.
gravitational force was less?
Good question.
What if the density of the planet is increasing over time and making the gravitational force stronger?
Also a good.
We don't understand gravity. I mean, at all. We think it's like a big sheet with a bunch of balls rolling around on it. Our view on gravity is so out of whack, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, it's possible that they had hollow bones. It's also possible that gravity was different. If there was an additional, what was it? An additional 1 pound of atmospheric pressure. I think it was 1 pound. It was not much. Maybe 5 pounds, but I think it was 1. If there was 1 pound more atmospheric pressure in the Earth's atmosphere, spiders would be the size of cars. Crazy.
What? One additional pound of atmosphere.
I read that somewhere, and it's lodged in my brain as useless information. So go fact check, people. Go fact check. Don't take anything French says seriously. Look it up yourself.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
You got, and I love this question for you because you got sticky notes.
Yeah.
If you imagine the consciousness, you imagine the human consciousness is a computer screen inside the brain, and there's a little man watching it's a terrible analogy for consciousness. It has plenty of flaws, but if you just indulge for a second and you were to have a sticky note, you could, because people sometimes put sticky notes on their monitors, on their computer monitors on the edge. What's that?
Silly people. Yes.
Okay. If you could write something on a sticky note and stick it to the monitor inside the consciousness, everyone's brain all at once, what would you write on that sticky note?
Be kind.
Dig it.
I think that's the biggest flaw, is that people are too busy in their preoccupied states of autopilot to remember that we are all human beings on a path at a different point, deeply unconscious most of the time, unaware, just trying to do the best fucking thing we can do, however that looks. And we are too hard on one another without having the wherewithal to keep foremost in our mind that prime directive that everybody is just trying to do the best job that they can.
That's awesome. I think that's a perfect note to end on there, Rob. So
Excellent.
Is there anything that you want to tell the audience for them to check you out on socials, or anything you want there?
They can. My name is Robert Prince. You can find me on LinkedIn. You probably won't find me on Facebook or any of the other socials. You can find me on the Twitters. Watch us, QChaos. So chaos is spelled with a 0. It stands for quiet. My hacker alias when I was in college doing pen testing to give myself internet was Quiet Chaos.
Dig it. Good.
It's shortened to QChaos over the years.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rob. I could not be more grateful for your time and especially your thoughts. And this was an absolute blast. I love the like hybriding the gap of the floating peak to the pyramid and stuff. I'm like so nerding out over that.
We'll have to try the next one earlier in the day, so I'm higher energy. I'm not usually this low on energy. I'm usually like, bam, in your face.
Yeah. Oh, right? I know.
Right. Yeah. And it's just time of day. It's now quite late into the evening, and I had a long day, and I've had a long week. Even though it's Tuesday, I woke up today and I'm like, oh my god, this week is forever. What do you mean it's only Tuesday? Yeah, I think the last thing I'll leave everybody with is I used at my graduation speech. Just as thoughtless words are wasted, any man who tries to feed an albino gerbil mustard sauce is very strange and should be left well alone.
That's perfect. All right. Thanks, Rob.
No problem, buddy.
You have a good night, man. We'll be in touch. I'll let you know when this is uploaded.
Yeah, please do.
All right.
Hopefully it's not too much editing for you. Hopefully it's not one big long thing and it's broken apart into a couple, I don't know, whatever.
Oh, it's going to be one big long thing. I'm not editing this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, remember we took a bathroom break.
Yeah. Oh, I'll be editing that. Thank you for the reminder, buddy.
Take it easy, brother. Journey well. In like each.
Thank you, listener, for listening to this entire episode. You're awesome. I really appreciate it. I think that's pretty cool. If you want to help this podcast along because you want to hear more, then come follow me on Instagram at Talking About Talking Podcast. Twitter, talking the letter A, and then talking. YouTube, talking about talking. And share it with your friends. Send it to people. Talk about it. And that would be really cool. Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Bye.